Early March in New York carried the soft light of spring. From the 25th floor of a renowned private hospital on the Upper East Side, the morning sun streamed through tall glass windows, casting a golden hue across the quiet, elegant exam room. Dr. Ethan Cole adjusted the cuff of his shirt as his gaze rested on the busy streets far below. At 38, he was one of the city's most respected cardiologists, known not just for his expertise, but also for his distinguished medical lineage. His office reflected that heritage. Everything was refined, from the abstract paintings on the walls to the soft strains of classic jazz playing in the background. His patients were usually part of New York's elite, the kind who booked appointments months in advance for private consultations. "Dr. Cole, your next patient is here," his assistant's voice came through the intercom. He nodded, not giving it much thought. Just another routine appointment, or so he believed. The door opened slowly as if the person behind it wasn't sure whether to enter. Dr. Ethan Cole looked up, and something shifted quietly within him. Not a clinical response, but a pause, involuntary and silent. A young woman stood at the threshold, wearing a pale blue sweater, a knee-length skirt, unbranded canvas shoes. Her dark brown hair was tied back with an old elastic band. In her hand, she clutched a small cloth bag, like a shield. "Please, come in," Ethan said, rising and extending a hand. She stepped forward hesitantly, eyes fixed to the floor. "I'm Lily Hart," she murmured, her voice as delicate as a whisper in the wind. Ethan held his hand out for a moment longer, but Lily didn't take it. She simply nodded and clutched her bag tighter. He discreetly lowered his hand and gestured to the chair in front of him. Lily sat on the edge, back straight as if facing a tribunal. Her gaze never lifted from the patch of floor between her shoes. "I see your doctor in Albany referred you here. Can you tell me how you're feeling today?" Ethan asked, softening his voice intentionally. She nodded, slowly. "My heart beats very fast, especially when I have to talk to strangers," she said, voice trembling with honesty. "How long has this been happening?" he asked, listening while observing. "Since I was little, but it's gotten worse lately." Lily tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a small gesture that struck Ethan as oddly touching. "Do you live alone here in New York?" he asked gently. "No, I live in Albany with my grandmother. I only came here for this appointment." At that moment, her eyes met his, only for a second, then quickly looked away. But in that fleeting instant, Ethan saw a kind of pure loneliness he had never witnessed in another human being. "This will be just a routine checkup," he said, almost to reassure himself. But he knew, from that moment on, nothing would be routine again. Ethan nodded, jotting a few notes into her file. The room was so quiet he could hear the faint scratch of pen on paper. "Lily, I'd like to listen to your heartbeat. It's just a basic step, very gentle. Would that be all right?" he asked, keeping his tone as soft as possible. Lily looked down at the cloth bag resting on her lap. She clutched it so tightly, her knuckles turned white. I've never," she stammered, then fell silent. "Never had a doctor examine you this way?" Ethan asked, careful to keep his voice neutral. She shook her head. "I've never let anyone touch me. I mean, not in a medical way, not at all." A gentle yet heavy silence settled over the room. Ethan didn't know whether it was surprise or something deeper, but something inside him cracked a little. "All right," he said after a moment. "We'll do this in the way that's most comfortable for you. I'll place the stethoscope over your clothing. You won't need to remove anything, okay?" Lily nodded, her face flushing crimson. She gripped her bag tightly, then loosened her shoulders just slightly. Ethan approached slowly, carefully, as if nearing a frightened bird. He gently set the stethoscope against her blouse. "Take a deep breath for me, Lily." She obeyed, eyes shut tight. In his ears, her heartbeat pounded, fast, erratic, desperate, like a knock on a door from someone pleading to be let in. Ethan frowned in concern. "Do you often feel this way when someone gets close to you?" he asked when the checkup was complete. Lily opened her eyes, gaze distant. "Almost always, especially when it's a man." Ethan nodded, and something in his own chest tightened, not because of the medical symptoms, but because of something achingly human. Ethan quietly set the stethoscope down, his eyes still fixed on Lily. Her heartbeat fast, irregular. Didn't sound like the cardiac issues he was used to diagnosing. It was something different, something more emotional than physical. "Lily," he began, his voice lower now, "based on what I just heard, I don't believe there's a structural issue with your heart. But to be absolutely sure, I'd like to run a few more tests." She looked up, concern flickering in her eyes. "You mean I might have heart disease?" "Not exactly. I suspect something more related to emotional stress, specifically social anxiety. But to rule out all risks, I'd like you to wear a device called a Holter monitor. It's small, painless, and records your heartbeat over 24 hours. 24 hours? She repeated, fingers tracing the edge of her cloth bag. "So I'd need to stay in New York overnight?" Ethan nodded. "I know that might be inconvenient, but tracking your heart's activity in everyday settings will give us a clearer picture. I'll also order a blood panel to be safe." She was quiet for a moment, then slowly nodded. "Okay. If it helps you understand what's happening." "Lily, I don't just want to understand your symptoms," Ethan said, leaning in slightly. "I want to understand you." The words made her look up. Her brown eyes, usually evasive, held his gaze just a little longer this time. "We'll have everything ready for you tomorrow morning. If you need anything at all, don't hesitate to tell me. All right?" She nodded softly. "Thank you, Dr. Cole." As she left, Ethan remained still, watching the door long after it closed. His hand unconsciously tightened around his pen. He couldn't explain why, but one thing was clear. Lily Hart was unlike anyone he had ever met. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the hospital earlier than usual. On his desk lay a single patient file, Lily Hart's name printed neatly at the top. He had never thought about a patient so much after hours. "Dr. Cole," came Rebecca's voice through the intercom. "Ms. Hart is here." Now her appointment is at 10. She said she took an early bus from Albany. Her hostel lost her reservation. She's been here since 5 a.m. She's in the waiting room. Ethan frowned. "Ask Carla to brew fresh coffee and bring some pastries. And send her in." When Lily stepped inside, she wore the same clothes as the day before, only slightly more wrinkled. Her hair was a bit messy, dark circles under her eyes, but her gaze tried to stay composed. "Where did you sleep last night?" Ethan asked, concern threading through his voice. "The bus station," she whispered. "The hostel said they didn't find my name. I've never booked a place before on my own, so I must have done something wrong." She lowered her head, hands clutching the straps of her bag. Ethan felt something rise in his chest, almost anger. Not at her, but at a world that had let someone like her face it alone. "Lily," he said, more gently than he intended, "why didn't you call me? Or your grandmother? My grandma doesn't know I had to stay overnight. If she knew, she'd worry and insist on coming, but her arthritis makes it hard to travel. I didn't want to bother you." "You're not a bother," Ethan said, locking eyes with her. "Your safety and well-being, that's part of the treatment too." Days later, Ethan sat back in the chair across from her as Carla brought in coffee and pastries. Lily whispered a thank you, still not lifting her head. She nibbled tiny bites, sipped her coffee as if trying not to disturb the air around her. Ethan watched. Every movement was small, restrained, like she was trying to take up as little space in the world as possible. "Lily, may I ask something a bit personal?" he said. She nodded without hesitation, which surprised him slightly. "Does your grandmother know about your heart symptoms? Are you too close?" "Very close. She's all I have. But I don't want her to worry. She already blames herself for me being different." "Different?" Ethan's brow furrowed. "I was always the quiet kid, hiding behind my mom when people came over. At school, I ate alone. The other kids made fun of me. After my parents died, I shut down more. My grandma took me to therapists, but I couldn't talk. I just stayed silent." Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. He had never heard someone so young speak about themselves with such honesty and fragility. "What do you do in Albany?" he asked gently. "I take care of my grandma and do embroidery for a little shop. I like working with my hands. When I'm sewing, my mind goes quiet." She looked up at him for the first time during the entire visit, a fleeting glance, but enough to tighten something in his chest. "Lily," he said softly, "your Holter monitor results show no signs of heart disease. Physically, your heart is strong. These episodes of rapid heartbeat, they're likely tied to social anxiety." Lily was quiet for a moment, then asked, barely above a whisper, "So, I'm not dying of a heart attack?" Ethan smiled gently. "No, but I don't think we should dismiss it either. Anxiety needs treatment too. I'd like you to consider therapy. I've tried that, it didn't work. I don't know how to talk about. You're talking to me now," Ethan smiled, "and doing just fine." A week had passed since their last appointment, but Lily's image hadn't left Ethan's mind. That was rare. He'd treated hundreds of patients, but none had lingered in his thoughts like this. On Thursday evening, after a long day at work, Ethan picked up his phone, then set it down. Picked it up again, hesitated, then dialed the number saved under Lily Hart. "Holta?" The line rang once. Then, her soft, familiar voice. "Hello? Hi, Lily, it's Dr. Cole. Sorry to bother you. I just wanted to check in. How have you been feeling after a week on the medication?" "Oh, hello, doctor," she replied, a bit surprised. "I think it's helping. My heart doesn't race as much when I leave the house." "That's good to hear." Ethan paused, then spoke quickly before he lost courage. "Lily, can I ask something non-medical?" "Okay. If you're comfortable, would you like to have coffee with me? Not as doctor and patient, just two people talking, somewhere quiet." There was silence on the other end, long enough to feel like a lifetime. "Are you still there?" he asked, nervous. "Yes," she said softly. "I'm just surprised. No one's ever asked me out for coffee before. I mean, not in that way. It doesn't have to be a date, it can just be two people sharing conversation. You wouldn't be embarrassed to be seen with me?" The question hit Ethan like a punch to the chest. "Lily," he answered sincerely, "I'd be honored to sit with you at any cafe, anywhere." After a moment's pause, her voice came through, quiet but steady. Then, "Saturday, 3 o'clock. I know a little place in Brooklyn." Saturday arrived with a soft breeze and the muted gray sky of early spring. Ethan arrived 15 minutes early at the little cafe in Brooklyn, a quiet spot tucked on a cobblestone corner, lined with wooden bookshelves, warm yellow lights, and soft jazz humming from an old speaker. He chose the farthest corner table, a place with the most privacy, ordered 2 cappuccinos, then sat waiting. His fingers brushed the table's edge, but his mind was more tangled than during any surgery he'd ever performed. At exactly 3 o'clock, the glass door opened. Lily walked in. She wore a simple navy gold dress, brown ballet flats, and her hair hung loose around her shoulders. Her eyes scanned the room before they found him. There was still nervousness in her gaze, but also hope. "Hi," she said, almost a whisper. "Hi, Lily." Ethan rose with a softness he didn't know he had. "You look truly beautiful." Lily blushed and stepped toward the table, sitting down carefully, her hands folded in her lap as her eyes darted across the room, examining every tiny detail to avoid meeting his. "This place is lovely," she said quietly. "I thought you'd like it," Ethan smiled. "It's quiet and full of books." Lily nodded. "I like reading, especially at night when my grandma sleeps. I read old novels." "You seem to have a very deep soul," Ethan said. Lily looked up at him for the first time that day, and this time, she didn't look away. They sat there for another 2 hours, talking about little things, books, flowers, childhood memories. Every word, every glance was slow, sincere. When Ethan walked Lily to the cafe door, the sky had turned dusky. She turned to him and smiled, and for the first time, didn't lower her gaze. He stood still, watching her disappear around the corner. Inside his chest, one clear thought echoed, maybe the most healing thing. is simply another human being. 3 months had passed since that first coffee date in the little Brooklyn cafe, and on a gentle June afternoon, Lily Hart stood in front of the mirror in her small Albany apartment, adjusting a loose strand of hair from her bun. She wore a cream-colored dress that her grandmother once called the sunshine dress. Soft, simple, but it made her glow in a quiet, graceful way. "You look beautiful," Grandma Rose said from the living room, her eyes filled with pride and emotion. "Beautiful from the inside out." Lily smiled, for the first time feeling like those words weren't just kindness, they were true. She had changed. From a girl who once looked only at the floor, avoiding every glance, Lily now dared to look into the mirror and saw a woman becoming whole. She had started therapy with a specialist in Albany, someone Ethan had found for her. The first sessions had been hard, but she hadn't given up. She even created a small social media page to share her embroidery patterns and received sweet messages from strangers all over the country. And above all, every weekend Ethan made the nearly 3-hour drive from New York to Albany, not as a doctor, but as a companion, someone she was learning to trust, to open up to, and to love. Today, he was arriving a bit earlier, not for a checkup, not just for coffee, but to ask her officially if she'd consider moving to New York to start a new life beyond the walls of fear she had lived within for so long. When the doorbell rang, Lily's heart raced, but this time not from anxiety, from joy. Ethan stood there, holding a bouquet of wild daisies, his smile as warm as the June sun. "I have a crazy idea," he said. "Want to hear it?" She nodded without hesitation. "Let's get married." She stood still for a moment, not from panic, but from emotion. "Really?" "Really. Nothing big, nothing fancy, just you, me, your grandma, and the people who love us. A day that's quiet but meaningful." Lily smiled, a smile full of tears. "Last night, Grandma said she dreamt of me in a wedding dress, and smiling. I never thought I'd come this far. And yet, here you are," Ethan whispered, "and I've never been so sure of anything." The night before the wedding, Lily sat by the window with her embroidery hoop, untouched in her lap. The moonlight touched her fingers, but she didn't move. "What if I'm still too scared?" she whispered into the quiet room, not expecting an answer. Ethan, sitting beside her with his sleeves rolled up and his elbows on his knees, looked over. "Then we'll be scared together," he said softly, "and we'll build something brave from that." Lily blinked, eyes stinging. She reached out, resting her hand gently over his. It was the first time she initiated touch. "I never thought I'd make it this far," she said, barely louder than breath. Ethan squeezed her hand. "You didn't make it alone." 2 months later, in the little garden behind Grandma Rose's home in Albany, they got married. No grand orchestra, no long guest list, just sunlight spilling through the trees, birdsong weaving through the air, and a handful of old wooden chairs dressed in simple white linen. Lily wore a hand-embroidered dress, one she made herself. Every stitch represented a fear released, every pattern a step toward healing. Ethan wore a white shirt, no tie, his eyes never leaving the woman walking slowly toward him. Grandma Rose sat in the front row, holding a floral handkerchief, her eyes misty with joy. When they exchanged vows, Lily looked deeply into Ethan's eyes. "You made me believe that love isn't something I have to hide from," she whispered. "And you," Ethan replied, "remind me that the truest love doesn't always arrive like lightning. Sometimes it comes in the gentlest breeze and stays." And when they kissed for the first time as husband and wife, a soft wind swept across the distant field. An imperfect beginning. Quiet, honest, and maybe exactly what they both needed.